Well, welcome to the podcast today, Manish. Today we're going to talk about something that I think the trend is very clear. I came across this stat not too long ago, and we decided to do a podcast about it. And the stat is something that TDA does, breakaway broker survey. Right, every year they do this survey, and this year for 20, I shouldn't say this year, but for 2019, the TDA breakaway survey referenced that 55% of those in the survey are looking to create their own RIA. Think about that for a second. I mean, that's massive. Last year it was like 44 or something. So that's a pretty big jump. But that's a really massive stat, and I think it's interesting because of the fact that going independent means something a little different for everybody. Now, you and I, for years, let me ask you this: what are your thoughts at that stat to begin with?
Well, I think the one caveat there is there's probably a lot of advisors who are with hybrids that are breaking off into independence that maybe aren't calculated in there as well.
Right. Yeah, and it's this is their question essentially is always about the next 12 months. So it's not that someday pie in the sky. These are people that are thinking, I've got to start taking steps right now. And there's the basis for us, right? You and I for years have not only watched but seen advisors who have tried to go through those steps. In many cases, we've helped them go through those steps. Sometimes it's a referral, it's a whatever, maybe a place. We're going to talk about some points today that you and I have had discussions with other advisors going through this, and we thought it would be a good topic to help maybe others that are thinking about going down that path. How to be your own RIA and what it takes and things to be considerate of.
Yeah, and in a 20-minute podcast, we have to limit it to what we think are the most important. There's obviously a lot of steps to take. I think generally people put too much pressure on themselves. It's not as hard as you think. If you listen to lawyers and compliance people, you would never do anything. You would just hide in your closet and be scared of everything. It's not hard. There's things out there. There's people out there that can help you get this rolling. And we've helped a lot of people. And we like this business, the independent RIA side of it. And so we want to highlight a couple key points. The first one being, I think the most important, at least to start, is the custodian choice. Who and where. So what are your thoughts on that?
Well, without going in too much in the weeds, we've seen a lot of differences between custodians. And of course, I think the elephant in the room is merger acquisition, right? Advisors, let's say just even in the last 5 years that have created their own RA, have suddenly found themselves in many cases in an interesting situation because of different mergers and acquisitions, and custodians that maybe were really kind to the 20, 30, $50 million RIA, and now who knows what's going to happen. So a custodial choice, there's no guarantee in life, but I think you have to look very, very hard at where you're choosing, because not only costs, but also other features can really come into play, as well as, of course, the basic service that everybody's supposed to do so well at and nobody does.
Yeah, and so if we talk about who, you have your large custodians like Fidelity and TD and Schwab and Pershing, and then you also have these trust companies out there that still exist. Some have been purchased, like Trust Company America by E-Trade, and there's a lot of choices. And to your point, you have to really take your business model and then do a deep dive into what exactly are the upfront costs, the ancillary costs. And I think it's important to really figure out how your custodian makes money, because if they are making money on cash and cash rates start to dry up, listen, no one works for free. They're going to come after you one way or the other. And there's nothing wrong with that. You just need to understand the future of that custodian and decide accordingly.
Yeah, and you really have to, I think something else that gets overlooked a lot of times until after the transition starts, or you start to work with a custodian, is a lot of the nickel dime stuff. I mean, account fees, annual fees, paper statements, right? All those those are boring and nobody wants to take the time to ask the question. But like I said, nothing, and I've said this on other podcasts as well, nothing in life is free. It just gets paid for somewhere else. And that oftentimes is where there are a lot of sort of hidden fees if you're not paying attention. They may be disclosed, but if you haven't read them, to you, the advisor, they're still hidden. And certainly that makes for a bad client experience when the client calls not expecting something. So as we touch on this topic, we're really with custodians. We're really talking a little bit about back office, and I think something that we want to hit on in regards to the back office is like portfolio management software. Those sorts of things. And I think you have a little bit more expertise in that area because some provide some of those kinds of tools, some don't. What's that landscape look like?
Yeah, so once you choose your custodian, you have to decide on how you want to trade, bill, performance reporting, and that usually requires an outside software. Now, there are custodians that are starting to build that in. Fidelity has something on the roadmap. Something like Ultralight has something included in there. So you may be able to get by with using whatever the custodian has, but 9 times out of 10, you need a portfolio management software. Now, full disclosure, we've used Orion since 2007, but we've researched a lot. Just like any relationship, it's important to do your due diligence and constantly look for alternatives that may be better for our clients, better priced for us. But those are the things you have to look into. First of all, what is the cost, right? That's important for every advisor, but I don't think that's the number one criteria. You really need to believe in the roadmap of the company. And here's what I mean by that. There's a lot of smaller firms offering portfolio management solutions, and they're a third of the price of maybe an Orion or a Black Diamond. Problem is, they don't have the money to put back into the infrastructure. They don't have the money to continuously grow unless they grow really fast. And you could be stuck with a software system that's not making updates and that's also primed for a buyout or a merger acquisition. And so these are some of the things you have to keep in mind when you're looking at these different software systems. Do your due diligence, talk to clients, and also believe in the company itself.
Yeah, I think that's some good points. I mean, there's financial planning, there's CRM, there's portfolio management solutions. There's all kinds of things like that can be, in some cases, bundled in. And of course, the large custodians have done a lot of that buying of technology, whether that be financial planning or et cetera. What I guess Fidelity bought eMoney a couple of years ago. Orion isn't a custodian, but they bought advisors. So there's a lot of different things like that go into what's really there, right? Is it an integration or is it actually something that's built to work together?
You have to look at the ancillary software and figure out if you want to then plug in on top of what the portfolio management software has these different tools, and that's also gonna jack up the cost as well.
Yeah. Well, and from an integration standpoint, right? We repeatedly say integrations don't work, but if you're used to using a couple of tools and maybe your CRM, you want to keep using it, like get some real examples of seeing that in action together, if at all possible. Don't just hear that, oh yeah, we integrate with that, and assume that it's all good. Otherwise, you're going to get a name and a phone number, and that's about it. All right, as we move on, let's dig into another point, which is really compliance. And certainly we're not compliance experts, but we've worked with quite a few different variations there. I think one of the things that comes into play is the tuck-in versus outsourcing of that compliance scenario. So you want to speak to that a little bit?
Yeah. So compliance, we're not talking about policies and procedures and reviews and things like that. I mean, there's we can touch on that a little later. There's firms that can help. What we're really talking about is what's the structure of your practice. Do you want to be completely independent under your own brand name and then outsource everything, or do you want to tuck in? And what we mean by tuck in is a great example of someone like Carson Wealth, who is a great firm out of Omaha. And essentially what happens is they will either buy you or you associate with them, and your advisory services are offered through Carson Wealth. And they take care of compliance and investments and have a whole breadth of services. So there's definitely some benefits to tucking into a larger organization. You get to leverage all their relationships, including custodial. However, you do lose some of your brand, and it being your independent business.
Yeah, I think there's, it's interesting, right? In our business, our industry, there are so many words that mean different things based on what the context. And so, a lot of advisors say, "Well, I'm an independent advisor, right? Because I'm not at a wirehouse." And then you keep working down the mix, and you say, "Well, okay, well, I'm independent advisor because I'm no longer with a broker dealer, and then I'm an independent advisor because I'm with let's say a Carson Wealth, right? A very structured RIA that's a larger group versus going all the way down to it's my business, damn it, and I'll run it the way I want to run it, right? And it's just you and your team. And it's interesting because you look at what level of independence do you really want to be. With each step down on that notch, you're really increasing, in my opinion, the level of independence that you have, right? Who's making the final decision on what partners you work with, what software you have, the custodian, all those things. And when you get to the point of fully independent, where it's your RIA and that's the only business that you're doing, you're the one that's making those decisions. And so hopefully these points we're talking about become very, very valid. Now, like I said, it's really about what level of independence do you want to have.
Correct. Yep. And part of the business partners, choosing business partners, is the investment side of it. Well, as an RIA, you're going to have to make some key decisions when it comes to the investment side of your practice. And to me, it's quite simple. You can there's variations, of course, but you can either self-manage as an advisor, rep as PM, advisor as PM, where you're making all the portfolio management decisions for your clients. That opens up a whole can of worms when it comes to models and trading, and compliance. And secondly, you can outsource everything to third-party strategists. And those are two important decisions that you're going to have to make at the onset of your RIA, for the most part, to hit the ground running.
Yeah, and I think I would add another step to that, right? First is just doing it yourself as far as managing the portfolios, of which those questions about portfolio management systems and things are very valid, that we talked about earlier. Second being, as you mentioned, outsourcing the whole ball of wax so that you're just using strategists. But I'm going to add a third layer, and that is working with another group or outsourcing the OCIO function, because that's becoming more and more prevalent. I know I recently did a blog post on that, and that's something that it can really be a benefit to the business, because in the end, the more independent of that scale that I was talking about, the more independent you become, the more hats you wear. The more hats you wear, the less time you have. So, where you can outsource to third-party strategists is great, but you have to figure out the due diligence process and keep an eye on them and learn about new ones so that you have an idea what's good and how
and that's fine. I mean,
all those things.
You can, yeah. It's really, it just depends on each advisor.
Right.
And sometimes it's a progression of mistakes and achievements. And what I mean by that is, you can start as self-managed, and I think, in my experience, a lot of younger advisors typically start as self-managers because they want to do it all themselves. Hey, you're hiring me. I'm going to manage the money. I'm going to make allocation decisions. As your business grows and as you progress as a person, you start to realize what's important to you in terms of time, in terms of business, how you want to grow. And the trend usually goes towards outsourcing as you get older, or
Right.
as your business grows and you want to allocate time to what's important. So,
Right.
you just have to, get on the bike yourself and figure out, what direction you want to take it.
Yeah, definitely. And I think these first couple of points, we've really focused on the impact to the advisor. And something that we have to keep in mind is really our next point, which is about the client experience. And we have to balance, right? What's the best for the client, but likewise, we all have to stay in business. We have to grow a business, make it something that's easy to work with. And in the end, look, we're very fortunate. Everybody who might be listening or watching this podcast is in a business that you have the opportunity, should you decide to really make it the way you want to live and help the people that you want to help. And that's a pretty cool scenario, because most jobs just aren't like that.
Yeah. So if we're talking about client experience, then one thing I think our industry has really, really failed to deliver a clean client experience. And I don't fault the advisors at the end of the day, because I think they haven't been given the right tools to deliver that. It's either software systems that are spread out all over the place, or they just rely on the custodian's system or the broker dealer that also is on top of the custodian. And I think we as an industry really need to play catch up here, because the consumer, their experience in other tools, financial or otherwise, is by far better than what financial advisors have been delivering. Of course, you can talk about the Amazon and things like that, but forget about that. Even Mint and Personal Capital and those different tools that are retail facing, I think the experience is so much better than some of the advisor tools that I've seen.
I would agree. I've actually used both just so that I could see what they looked like and functioned like, and I think in many cases, it's hard to put that kind of experience together. But here's the primary reason: they have one very distinct purpose, and that's to go straight to client direct and serve that particular niche. You as an advisor are forced to have to deal with, okay, well, in most cases, we've talked about sort of integrating all these different pieces of the puzzle, right? You have, the custodian's going to send some statements, and maybe a manager's going to send a report or two, and you want to do a financial plan, so there's a path, right? All these different things are different entry points for clients, and therein lies the rub. It's automatically 4 or 5 different portals or places that the clients have to go to get their information. They don't, in most cases, in my experience,
under someone else's brand.
Absolutely. Oh, that's a great one. Touch on that to expand what you mean when you say that.
Well, as an advisor delivering on client experience, you want to deliver on that experience and control it to a certain extent. If you are using the custodial login, a Fidelity or a TD, there's certain things you can't control. For one, the ads selling their services, they have their own version of a risk score. They have their own version of account aggregation, where they intake all the client's information, and you lose sight of a lot of that data. So it's important to keep it branded under who you are as an RIA, and also the data to make sure you have the data. And can act on that. So I think that's an important part here on delivering on the client experience, at least.
Yeah, I would agree. So in the end, look, instead, unfortunately, most advisors are faced with that 4 or 5 different entry points, 4 or 5 different portals, 4 or 5 different branding schemes, and the service model is just pretty tough to come together if it's not an all-in-one solution. And that's the mindset that we always talk about: is simplicity breeds clarity, right? How can we make, and this is what advisors should be thinking through their business on a daily basis, how can we make business simpler and the client experience more simple? So with that note, any other parting thoughts before we get to recommendations?
No, I mean, I think it's, there's a lot of steps here, but the main ones I think we touched on are custodian software, compliance, investments, and wrapping that all together and delivering that client experience.
Right.
There's a ton of presentations across the industry about it, but you're not going to know anything until you really dive into it and start doing these things yourself and learning. So look, we're just trying to offer some guiding wisdom and help along the way. So definitely reach out to us. We've been running an RIA and also helped other folks, so we know a couple things about it at least.
Yeah. All right, what you got for a recommendation?
So our industry doesn't need another publication, but this new one that came up recently called RIA Intel. I got to know one of the journalists, been following them well, and I really love it. It's a clean user interface, really timely articles. They're well written, and I think it's worthwhile. And here's the thing. I hate paywalls. I hate registration walls. Make your content free. Figure out another way to make money. There's no paywalls on any of this stuff. So, it's not gated at all. You can read the full content and enjoy it. I think it's a publication that advisors should have on their radar for sure.
Cool. Cool. All right. Well, I'm gonna change it up a bit from business, because this is a St. Croix ultralight fishing rod. Yeah. So as I seem to be stuck on fishing a lot this year, said self-distancing. I grew up crappie fishing and had an ultralight, and I just loved it, but I haven't done that in years. I've been a bass fisher.
Crappie fishing?
That's right, sir. But anyway, so this is the point where Christopher can put up our picture of this ginormous fish that I caught with this little bitty ultralight. Look, ultralights are very, very sensitive. They are for small panfish typically. And as evident by the very first fish I caught, it's sensitive enough to realize that big monster was on my line. So with a little bit of humor, I thought I would share my new St. Croix. It's my first St. Croix rod, so I'm kind of interested to see how it holds up over time.
Cool. Conquer fish.
Amen. All right, buddy. Hey, thanks. Any other thoughts before we go?
No, nothing. I'm good.
All right, rock and roll. We're out. Thanks.
Thanks.